nutrients from the water itself. So, this is whitewater lily I was talking about. So, in terms of, from an ecological perspective, natural shorelines and vegetation are very important to both, helping out reduce stormwater impacts and reduce runoff impacts and reduce erosion on your shorelines, as well as keeping the ecology of the lake intact. There's a lot of lakes, especially reservoirs down in the south, that have lost all of their shoreline vegetation and all of their floating vegetation as well, either through aggressive management practices or water level fluctuations, and they deal with a lot more, dirty water and algae blooms, and there really is a link. A lot of these guys, especially pickerweed and whitewater lily, they do a really good job of keeping the water cleaner. As I said before, with keeping the sediments intact, and providing habitat. Also, I'm gonna throw a little picture of a rain garden here. That may be something you touch on a little bit. That's another good way to help reduce nutrient loads. If you have an area where it looks like water's collecting on your lawn, maybe a good idea to put a rain garden in there. It's how to infiltrate. And then the last thing I got for you guys, sorry, I think I went over a little bit. Keep up with septic system maintenance. That's one of the biggest issues we have when we go into lakes and try and work with the lake to try and recover their nutrient status. Because of cost of maintaining, cost of upgrading. There's a big social aspect, a psychological aspect to septic systems. Nobody wants to say that their septic system is the one that's failing, and oftentimes a lot of the tests to find out if your septic system is failing are not private. It's not something that we can go on and just go on a survey in the lake and say, oh, this system's failing from the water. It's something that has to be volunteer driven, so there's some social aspects to that is some barriers. If it wasn't in the water to begin with, it shouldn't really end up there. Grass clippings, leaves, even fertilizer and pesticides goes with that. That's going to the third point. Be mindful of all that abuse in the water. Vegetation is good. Now it can get obnoxious at some points, and that's always a consideration to have, but it does have a lot of benefits to your shoreline. And the two kind of larger points is what happens on your property does affect others around you. In terms of, if the septic system's impaired, or there's a bunch of shoreline erosion coming off, there's a bunch of impervious surfaces bringing in nutrients. All this, the lake is not, the parcels on your property don't extend into the water in terms of influence. So anything you do is going to have an impact. So the way these lakes recover is if everyone buys into these strategies and helps to recover. But also, be an active part of the lake's recovery. Lakes don't get better unless the stakeholder group wants them to get better. Only drinking water reservoirs where nobody lives on and they can do drastic things, or small ponds where they can do drastic things where these lakes recover without input from the stakeholders. So that's all I really have.
Yeah, hi. Great presentation, by the way. Thank you. It's really good.
We're only going to take this one question because what we're going to do is have Dave. We're going to have David speak, and then I think it'll be interesting to have the questions with both speakers.
So I just wanted to go back to, I'm assuming every lake is different, obviously.
Yes.
Different ways of solving. You had a slide earlier on with blue-green algae, looked like a seed of, looked like a green carpet.
Yes.
Right. That used to be right out here before I moved here. We used to have that all out here. Matter of fact, I used to fish, you wouldn't even get a plug, hit the water, just
Yeah.
After that, we decided to do lake drawdowns. And every year we drop it down 3 to 4 feet, and we wound up killing all those weeds and killing all the weeds in the cove. Now you mentioned something, it sounded like almost like drawdown wasn't good, but it's been very helpful to this lake, so I just wanted to make sure that that was mentioned.
Well, that's important. I'm glad you mentioned it because every technique has its positives and negatives, and the positive and negatives are based on what you use the lake for.
Right.
So drawdown can have positives in terms of your docks will be exposed. If not, the ice will destroy docks, and so drawdown is a positive for that. However, it has negatives. It can have more flocculent sediments can go through the drawdowns. Oftentimes we see drawdowns when they use it for aquatic plant management. It's oftentimes not effective because there's a bunch of plants that can survive drawdowns. So I'm glad you brought that up because every technique has.
Right. Because this lake drawdown seems to work perfectly. Last year, 2 years ago, when we didn't have the drawdown, I couldn't even get out of my cove. Actually, I broke an oar. off because there was so much weeds. Now there's no weeds in any of these coves.
I would just say though, I think, you know, to AJ's point, everything's got positive and negative. And so we can't necessarily identify and point to one thing and say, that is the
No,
positive.
I'm not saying.
Because basically it's a very fragile system.
Right.
And every move that you make has a systemic effects. So I think getting, you know, engineers in to kind of help tell us what those positive and negatives are on all of those issues will help us then make better educated decisions.
The
Right.
drawdown is not selective about what it kills. It'll kill the good with the bad.
Well, or it also opens up you know, an open ground that's highly fertile that doesn't have any plants on it, which then might invite invasive, you know, material to come in. So it's got positives and negatives.
And you know, it's kind of a tough thing for stakeholders to hear. You know, science is very, you know, in terms of, you know, if you ask, you know, what a particular technique can do and what its impacts are, you know, there's a risk associated with everything. You know, so with a drawdown, you know, yes, it can clear a bunch of areas. We've seen that in other lakes. It's not the only lake that we've seen that happen. However, there's a bunch of lakes where they do a drawdown, let's say on a shallow slope, and then it takes out all the lilies that were holding in that sediment. Fish spawning, those mats, if you're drawing down below them, they could potentially have an impact on that. So, yeah, like I said, I'm very glad you brought that up because, you know, as you go through and as you know, in the years coming, you know, there will be techniques that will be proposed to you that will be new, and those are the kind of conversations you have to kind of have in your head as far as in terms of.
Okay, great, yeah, because the drawdown has been a technique we've been using for years here, and it's been successful.
So it segues me well into introducing David because I think we're going to hear really similar concepts, but from a different perspective of a different kind of education and approach to things. And I think we're very fortunate to have David in our community and with us today. And I was really so happy to come. I do want to have questions. I know it's late and I know people are going to have to leave, but I'm going to say that when we finish, we'll have both experts up here to answer questions together, and I think the dialogue is going to be really interesting, just to see how those responses have differences and similarities. And I think, you know, both people are already saying things like, there isn't always one answer. And we always love to have one answer. We love to know that pneumonia is caused by pneumococcal, you know, bacteria, and that we can give you penicillin and you'll be better. But lake ecology is a little more like heart disease, where you have to do exercise and eat well and have the right kind of genetics and maybe take medicine. And it's just a more complicated and long-term kind of approach to it. It's really a pleasure to introduce David Sider. He is, I would say maybe your start in this area begins at Vassar, because it might begin before that, but he was an undergraduate at Vassar, which, as you know, is just down the road, and studied art history there. After that, he went to University of Pennsylvania, where he studied the field that was called landscape architecture, now is a little bit more called landscape design, and he studied also from the perspective of managing communities. And I think it was something that was probably, I don't know much about, but was probably an unbelievable experience. That's an interesting place and an interesting city. And he has since formed in Brooklyn, or in New York, his own company, which now employs 25 young enthusiastic people, and he's really become a preeminent landscape architect in the New York area, designing rooftops, green structures all through the city, and we're just so happy, not just that he's here in our community, but that he's willing to forego some of the just anonymity of enjoying relaxing in his life and come here and speak to us and help us think through some of these things. So thank you, David.
Thank you.
So much.
It is true, I come up here and I garden and I don't really get out that much, and it's a great kind of counterbalance to the city. I'm only going to speak for a couple of minutes today, but basically I'm going to have this PDF which I could share with Ina and then circulate. I'm basically here to kind of just introduce myself. Future Green Studio, as I mentioned, is my studio in Brooklyn. We do all sorts of work. We've done a lot of urban projects, and that's primarily our focus, but we've also worked with a number of both homeowners and other kind of stakeholders up in the Hudson Valley. What I'm going to talk about is just generally planting design, and what I'm kind of in discussions with Ina about is how Future Green Studio can be a kind of ongoing resource for the lake to help kind of both interpret lake management plans that come out and provide, alternative or augment those with creative solutions that both you can apply to both an entire lake on its own as a kind of master plan, but also on an individual homeowner by homeowner basis. So almost taking AJ's last slide of like what could we do, and putting some graphic information to that and flushing that out so that everybody has like a handbook of what they can be personally responsible for, and then also in a broader sense what we can do as a community to kind of take the plan that is developed by engineers and then finding ways of implementing that over time.